My professor told me that God is Santa Claus and the Bible is totally irrelevant. Science and faith don't contradict each other. Faith is answering the question, who created? And science is answering the question, what's the process that goes on in creation and nature? You know, when you criticize Christians, I hope you know who you're criticizing. And this idea that Christianity is a white Western religion is totally false. And this whole idea that if you're really committed to Christ, you're going to be a minister or a priest or a monk or a nun is baloney. It's not biblical.
Why is the religion of Islam growing the way it is? Why are they exponentially growing? Why is it that, God forbid you say anything about them, you have to be careful? I mean, we had Bishop Marmari here. He flew in from Australia to be on a podcast. A Syrian man. I had Georgienko here. Georgienko, you and him did a phenomenal podcast together. And we had a panel of 4 Assyrians, right? Vinny, Assyrian, myself, George, and Bishop Marmari. He gets up there and he says, let me tell you the difference between your prophet and my prophet, right? And he explains Muhammad against, Jesus. Goes back and preaches. A young boy shows up to the church, grabs a knife, stabs his eye, and he's blind. He's gone. He lost his eye, right? Why do you not hear stories when people make fun of Christianity and Jesus? You don't hear stories like that. Why is the fact that when someone in Hollywood becomes a Christian, they're demonized, they lose jobs, and they're publicly praying? In the NFL, one athlete, the guy that's the Houston, what's the Houston Texans, the young guy who had a very, very good season, Stroud, I think something Stroud.
Yep.
He says, I want to thank Jesus Christ. ABC cuts that part, right? Then they show everything about the interview except the part that he thanked Jesus Christ. But if somebody thinks Muhammad or Muslim, they protect it, they celebrate it. Why the difference in the way they treat Christians versus Muslims?
This past spring, I was at Ole Miss University, and a young woman stepped out of the crowd, and with tears coming down her cheeks, she said, my professor told me that God is Santa Claus, and the Bible is totally irrelevant. So there has been an incredible leaning towards secularism in the faculty on the major university campuses around this country, and it has had horrible consequences, as Christians' faith has been minimized, ridiculed by some of the most intelligent people in this culture, are university professors. Now, there are many tremendous Christian faculty, and I get to meet them regularly. But there has been a all-out pedal-to-the-metal war against faith in Christ. It's been pictured as arcane, ignoramus would follow it, science is the way to go, and the whole issue of science and faith, that's a straw man. Science and faith don't contradict each other. Faith is answering the question, who created, and science is answering the question, what's the process that goes on in creation and nature? There's no contradiction, and yet even that has been used to minimize the Christian position. Good gracious, Charles Darwin, one of his best friends was a guy named Asa Gray, who was a botanist and who taught at Harvard University. And they corresponded. Asa Gray sent 300 letters to Charles Darwin. And Asa Gray says, Charles, you don't have to reject your faith in Christ just because of evolution. There's an intelligent mind behind this amazing process of evolution. And Charles Darwin couldn't buy it. I personally feel that Charles Darwin rejected Christ because of his daughter who died and because of his uncle, who was not a believer in Christ, who died. So I don't think it was because of evolution, really, if you go down to the fact. But once again, science is used in our culture to minimize faith in Christ. And so it's hard. Now, let's compare the growth of Islam with the growth of Christianity. Christianity is booming around the world, not necessarily in the West, but in Asia, Africa, and South America, faith in Christ is growing like leaps and bounds. That's why when all these new atheists say, oh, religion is on its way out, that's baloney. Not only is Islam growing, Christianity is growing. Christianity is still the largest religion in the world. And if the trends continue the way they are going today, there will be more followers of Christ in China than in any nation in the world. It's incredible, the growth of the underground church in China.
Yeah, but why is it that, if they're scared of allowing you to talk about Christianity, but Islam is protected? Why is there a level of fear of criticizing Islam and Prophet Muhammad, but none about criticizing Jesus and Christianity?
Well, at times I feel like it's an overreaction to colonialism. Obviously, colonialism has occurred, and Christian nations did colonize, and there was a lot of evil that went on. But that does not change the fact that there have been thousands of Christian missionaries who loved Christ and served people and gave out of their backside and their head to help people get well. I have a younger brother who's a transplant surgeon, and he spent a summer in Nepal helping people. He wasn't there to rip people off or to bring the American flag. He was there to introduce people to Christ and to love people as best he could. But there's been quite a reaction to colonization, and I think it's hopefully run its course. For instance, in this vein, Stephen Carter is an African-American professor at Yale Law School. And Stephen Carter does a great job asking, when you criticize Christians, I hope you know who you're criticizing. The demographic with the largest numbers of followers of Christ in the world is women of color. And the demographic with the largest number of followers of Christ in it percentage-wise in the United States is African-American women. So be very careful when you start criticizing Christians. And yet so many professors and so much thinking in the press in our country has basically said, oh, Christianity is a white Western man's religion. A young lady said that to me at the University of South Carolina. I was just about to answer her. A tall black gentleman steps out of the crowd and says, excuse me, I'm a grad student here and I'm from Ethiopia. Our Ethiopian Christian church is far older than any Christian church here in the United States or in any part of Western Europe. And this idea that Christianity is a white Western religion is totally false. You could have heard a pin drop. But that is the antithesis of what a lot of anthropology and humanities professors are teaching, that, oh no, Christianity is a white male religion, which is baloney. You know the demographic with the largest number of atheists? Mm-hmm. White men, white Western men.
Wow. So atheists, large demo is white male.
Yep.
Christians is African-American women.
Correct. In the United States.
That is wild. That is wild to have that breakdown. So, okay. So, you said everywhere it's growing. In the West, it's not, right? There's something that's going on in the West that's different than everybody else. If there's anywhere where you can show the proof that it's worked and it's produced the best society that you can raise kids, safe, grow, do your thing, build a good family, prosperity, you name it, it's America. Why, even though we have a case study to show how the right values and principles made America the greatest nation in the world, why not go back and, focus on teaching those values and principles to kids?
That's a great question. That's one of the reasons I'm so grateful to God for you, brother. You're a successful businessman. You understand the principles of doing business well and putting together companies well, and you are committed to Christ. Well, we need more of you who are in the marketplace living out what it means to be a follower of Christ in the practical, nitty-gritty details of everyday life. And this whole idea that if you're really committed to Christ, you're going to be a minister or a priest or a monk or a nun is baloney. It's not biblical. In Colossians 3:23, Paul writes, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as serving the Lord rather than people. And that's what you as a Christian businessman are trying to do. That's what I as a pastor and apologist on college campuses are trying to do. We're using whatever personality and gifts that God has given us to glorify Him by pointing people to Him and by living out a life of Christ-honoring integrity, compassion, hard work, and using the brains that God has given us to do the best we can.